So the quality study was published in Respiration a couple of years ago, or last year, I think. Last year, probably. And this study was basically for patients who had severe, predominantly upper lobe emphysema, as I alluded to earlier. Pretty much net criteria, but we were a little bit more relaxed because these patients were not going through general surgery. So patients who were a little sicker, with a little cardiac problem, mild CHF, in oxygen dependence, we didn't really stop them from going through the procedure. We did put them through the procedure. And nobody died. We didn't have any major complications. They were able to tolerate bronchoscopies, no major post-obstructive pneumonias. And we initially chose patients who were not on lung transplant or LVRS list, but now we are. So I have a patient who actually had this, failed, and he's now being transplanted. He was above 65, so we refused him here, but I sent him to Cleveland Clinic. They're doing it. And pulmonary rehab was not required, so it's a little different from the net criteria. We treated both upper lobes in the same bronchoscopy, so initially we thought about doing different bronchoscopies. We placed up to 6, 7, 8 different valves, so average was about 6 valves or 6.7 valves per patient. We had significant experience, about 600 valves in the initial trial. And the procedure took about an hour or so in the most cases. In some difficult cases, it took an hour and a half or so. No major problems placing the valves. Majority of the valves were segmental and few were subsegmental. And hospital stay was approximately 2.5 days to 3 days. Some outliers who developed pneumothorax and then chest tubes were placed and never had their leak stopped. That actually was sort of good for the industry because then we started placing valves to block the bronchopleural fistulas. And we already have FDA approval for that now. So we're doing that. No major migration. Those little hooks worked really well. And no expectorations of the valves or erosions or leaks. So our primary endpoint was St. Joe's Respiratory Questionnaire, or SGRQ. And anybody who had more than 4-point improvement was considered positive among the responders. At 12 months, we had about 63% responders, and we had about 9-point improvement in SGRQ, which was highly statistically significant. So this study has shown a real promise with minimal complications and no death. And when you compare it to other modalities available for COPD, the only thing that improves the SGRQ better is the net or lung volume reduction surgery. And then there's another thing slightly better is lung transplant, which is not here. But the second most effective modality to treat these patients was the endobronchial valve, aspiration valve, which improved an average of about 8 points in SGRQ. Now, we all, these are one of those things where we learn mechanisms even after we have done the studies, like in thermoplasty and asthma. So we all thought the primary mode was just atelectasis and taking care of the non-functional hyperinflated upper lobe so that remaining lung will have more room to expand and it will have more excursion and better functioning. But then what we started seeing was in most of the patients, there was no major difference in the total lung volume. Although we were seeing a little bit of collapse in the upper lobe. So lung volume changes regional, but not total. And then we noticed that there was a lot of redirection of the ventilation and perfusion. So what we started doing was we started doing quantitative CT scans and VQ scans on these patients to figure out why some patients were feeling so much better. And what we discovered was that, and this is actually really after going over our first 20, 30 cases, that a lot of average patient was redirecting 300 or so cc's of air from upper lobe to the lower lobes. So about 600 cc's of volume was redirected from upper to lower lobes when we blocked their both upper and lower lobes. And we did these very fancy CT scans showing how much air was there before and how much air is there afterwards. And then when we did VQ scanning in these patients, if you look at the upper to lower lobe ratio of perfusion before upper 1/3 to lower 2/3, after 1 month and after 3 months, the upper lobe perfusion has dramatically reduced and the lower lobe has dramatically increased, following the air, wherever the air is going. So primarily what we're doing is we're not changing total lung volume, but we're redirecting the volume to lower lobes, which are now overcompensating for the defected upper lobe, and the blood is following, and we're improving the VQ matching dramatically in the lower lobes. Complications were temporary bronchospasm, not very different from what we saw in sham-controlled bronchoscopies. Most common was valve-associated complication was pneumothorax because of the acute atelectasis in the upper lobe. Majority of them did not require chest tubes. We had predicted 2% with the protocol revision complication, and we saw less than 2% or so. And if you compare lung volume reduction to surgically versus bronchoscopically, if you see the NET trial here, that at 90 days was about 8. Outside of the NET trial was even more. NET trial had a very stringent exclusion-inclusion criteria. In our initial trial, which was pilot and before pilot, and now in the people who could be in the pivotal trial, which is now just finished last year, we had no deaths, no major air leak lasting more than 7 days, and even before we had a couple of days of air leak, which is expected in these patients. Look at the even NET trial air leak. Major pulmonary complications of pneumonia and pneumothorax, 0 in our current pivotal trial, and major cardiac events, 0. NET trial had all these complications. So these patients probably, if they can go through the surgery and not become a victim of the complications, would do probably better with LVRS surgically. But vast majority of these patients are not healthy enough to go through such a big surgery. So based on all those successes, we designed the pivotal trial, which was randomized, sham-controlled, 2-to-1. Patients got bronchoscopy and valves. In the treatment arm, control arm, just got the medication and sham bronchoscopy. 2 groups of investigators. Group B did the bronchoscopy, A did the assessment and evaluation post-operatively, and A never found out until we unblinded the patient and team after 1 year whether the patient had valves or not. They were not allowed to look at the CTs or X-rays or get the hospital records. And then we provided continued access, means patients who were in the sham control arm after 1 year were allowed, when we broke the blind and told them that they were not the real control, they were sham controlled, they were allowed to get the valves on company's expense. So the Spiration study has gone very successfully, and now we're compiling data from our pivotal trial, and we're probably in the next 6 months going in front of FDA with the data. Another trial we did was bronchoscopic lung volume reduction by inhomogeneous emphysema patients. And the concept here was how to get rid of hyperinflated upper parts of the lung, or even lower parts, since it was designed for homogeneous emphysema, was to make tiny extra holes in the airways and allow the air to come out of those little holes, because the airway itself collapses in severe emphysema patients for many reasons that I don't want to go into details of why airways become so collapsible and how hyperinflation pushes down. The bottom line was that the airways were collapsing and air was not leaking, and they were trapping air in the lung. But if we opened up tiny artificially generated airways and supported those by metallic valves, the air would leak and allow you to